You don't know Flack.
Thank you, Sergeant Essential. Thank you, Sergeant.
You don't know Flack.
Welcome to You Don't Know Flack, a podcast full of stories about retro gaming, retro computing, video games, arcade games, and technology from a guy who was there and still is. My name is Rob O'Hara, but for the next 30 minutes, you can call me Flack.
Episode 206, Lego.
Greetings and salutations, listeners, and welcome to another episode of You Don't Know Flack. Today is July 30th, 2021, and I am your host, Rob Flack O'Hara. On today's episode of You Don't Know Flack, we will be talking about Lego. But before we get started talking about Lego, let's load this week's notes from my trusty Commodore 64, and it takes, unfortunately, just a minute to load. So while there's a loading, we have just a few minutes to chat on this week's loading time.
Loading time. Loading time. Loading time.
Welcome back to another episode of You Don't Know Flack. I got to tell you right off the bat that there are two ways now to enjoy this show. You can listen to the audio podcast, and the audio podcast will be there forever and ever. That will never change. It will never go away. But if you're more of a video person and you enjoy watching videos and you want to see my good-looking mug do this show, then you could go to youtube.com/Sprite Castle, which is the name of my other podcast, but I'm combining all of my gaming-related and podcast-relating videos over into one channel. I had some of it on robohara.com. I had some of it on Sprite Castle, and so I've just decided to put all those things in one place. So now there's I do have a Wednesday night streaming show that I upload to the Amigos Retro Gaming YouTube channel, and that will always still go there. My show will always be available on the Amigos feed. The Amigos have been very, very good to me. I'm a big fan of their show, and they've really helped me expand my audience a little bit. So basically nothing's changing. You're not losing anything. All you are gaining, if you are interested in watching the show instead of merely listening to the show, then you can go to youtube.com/Sprite Castle, and you can watch. There's playlists set up where you can watch Sprite Castle, and you can watch You Don't Know Flack. I just started this last week. I did the first episode of Sprite Castle where I covered Burger Time. So if you want to watch gameplay video and you want to see the pictures and things that I'm talking about during the show, then you can watch it right there on YouTube. I will say that the video version of this show has about 50 unique pictures. So every time I'm talking about a new topic or a memory or things like that, there's probably a picture to go with it. Some people are not interested in the video versions. I can tell you, for the most part, I listen to podcasts either when I'm working from home or when I'm in the car. So I don't watch podcasts. I normally listen to podcasts, but I thought I would dip my toe into the world of video. So if you are a video person, it's out there. But again, the audio version will always be there. If I decide that I don't like doing the video version, or there's not enough people are watching it or anything like that, then the video part may go away someday, but the audio version of this show, as long as I'm doing a show, the audio version will be there. So again, if you want to see last week's Sprite Castle, where I played Burger Time, you can go to youtube.com/Sprite Castle and check out the playlist there and watch that. So again, I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but my weekly gameplay videos are always going to be over at Amigos Retro Gaming. And they have lots of other gameplay videos. So if you like my stuff, you might want to check out what else. There's a lot of people that are uploading to that channel, but all the other stuff that I'm uploading will go to youtube.com/Sprite Castle. Now, I did hint about other material possibly going up on Sprite Castle, and it's kind of, I don't really know what I'm going to do with the channel yet, but I'm thinking about, like, I make a lot of shelves. I do some woodworking, but it's not beautiful woodworking. It is functional woodworking in regards to shelves and brackets and display things and things like that. So, but maybe some how-to videos on how to make, those types of shelves. I do some artwork. I haven't done anything in a long time, but I'd like to get back to doing that and maybe, making some video content out of that. I may upload things about some of my collections, or going out thrifting, shopping. I don't really know yet, but all that stuff, if it's related to these shows and these same type of topics, then that's where I plan to upload that stuff. I wanted to talk a little bit about Amigathon. Now, I had really pushed Amigathon over the past several weeks. Amigathon is an extension of Extra Life. It is a fundraiser that happens annually where people stream for 24 hours and they play games and they get donations. And the Amigos podcast, John and Aaron have set up, they've kind of established this thing that they do every year with Amigathon, with all their Amiga friends and people that have followed the podcast and some of the friends they've made in the community. But this year they decided, instead of doing the stream for an entire 24 hours, they were just going to do 12 hours and then turn it over to other streamers. And so I was fortunate enough to be included in that. So my buddy Jeff, who I've mentioned in probably every episode of Sprite Castle, Jeff and I were made friends in middle school. We became friends and we've been lifelong friends. And he was the first person I knew that had a Commodore computer in his bedroom. I knew people that had them in their homes, but nobody who had one in their bedroom. And after I saw that, I begged my parents. I was like, I need a Commodore. I sound like Veruca Salt. Daddy, I want a Commodore. And I want it in my room now. And so I did eventually get a Commodore computer that same year, and I got it in my room. And so Jeff, some of you, if you go to my Wednesday night streams, you may see him in the stream as Steel Rat. But Jeff was able to join me, and so the two of us played some of the arcade games that we played growing up together. And we played a lot of those two-player games where you could cooperate or you could just outright kill your friend. So we played Joust, which is that way. We played Mario Brothers. We played Wizard of War. All those type of games where if you work together, you could get further in the game. And back in the day, we did used to try to work together. And then I would say that it was usually me who would kill Jeff and then pretend like it was an accident. And after 2 or 3 times, he would catch on that it wasn't an accident, and then he would just slaughter me in the game. So anyway, now that we're older, there's no pretense of it being an accident. He has a pretty good idea that I'm doing it on purpose. And so that was mostly what we did during the stream, is we played a lot of those games and just slaughtered each other. But we had a really good time. And the best news was that Amigathon set a goal, of $5,000 to earn. And before the stream ever got to my stream, so before they were done with their 12-hour segment, they had already broke that barrier, and they had set a new goal of 6,000, and they had broken that. I think by the time I took over, it was at 6,100, and it was 66 something. I knew it was going to be hard to get donations because people had already been donating for 12 hours. So a lot of people, they planned on donating, and they did. But a few people did go ahead and donate during my show. And I was very fortunate to get Frank from Retro Rewind. He sponsors Sprite Castle, and he sponsors the Amigos podcast, and he's really involved in the retro community, and retrorewind.ca is his website. And he sells peripherals and add-ons and things to repair and maintain and expand retro Commodore computers, Commodore 64, and even he has stuff for the Commodore 16 and the Plus 4 and of course Amiga stuff. And he donated a few prizes to me to be able to give out during the stream. So he had it on both sides. He was donating prizes to give away, and he was donating money to the cause. So a very, very generous guy. But two of the people that were on the stream, Buck Owens, ended up winning a freeload cartridge, which was the fast load clone cartridge that was donated by Retro Rewind. And then Zerfall, who is another subscriber and listener, won a Wi-Fi modem for the Commodore 64. So I was glad to give those away. And again, the only thing you had to do to qualify was to donate during the time. So those guys and a lot of other people donated. And I had already decided before the show started that I was going to give away a C64 Mini. And that was won by Beach Bum 7. So I just, I was going to send the one I had here, and then I looked on Amazon and they're down to like $40. So I said, instead of sending them a used one, I'll just buy a new one on Amazon and drop ship it to them. So that's what I did, and it shows on Amazon that yesterday it arrived. So Beach Bum, if you're out there, I hope you're playing some Commodore 64 games. The C64 Mini, it doesn't have all the features that the Maxi has. It doesn't have the working keyboard, and there are a few things it can't do, but it can play all those games. And with a USB hub, you can hook up the joystick and a USB external stick full of games. And what's the other thing? Oh, and a keyboard. If you wanted a USB, you can actually program stuff on BASIC with the C64 Mini. And the thing I like about it being $40 is you can put it in the living room, let kids beat on it. I mean, it's not like, taking an actual vintage machine and being worried that kids are going to break it, So anyway, congratulations to all those people, and really congratulations to the kids. They're the real winners in this, the kids that are having difficult times. God forbid anybody's child ends up having to go to a hospital and you don't have insurance to cover it or whatever, and all the donations made during Amigathon, which I think got around, I think $7,300. I mean, it's a lot of money, and it all goes directly to the Children's Miracle Network Hospital. So it was a good cause, and I was glad to be included in it. And I know Jeff, I can speak for Jeff as well, that we were. We had a good time. We played a lot of games. We did a lot of shots of whiskey, and we just had a good time. But we were both honored to be a part of Amigathon, and we're already looking forward to next year of what we're going to do. So we'll move on to the question of the month. Now, if you are one of my 16-bit Patreon supporters, you get to ask me a question that I will answer on one of my shows. If it's Commodore related, I'll answer it on Sprite Castle, and if it's not Commodore related, I'll usually answer it here on You Don't Know Flack. And this month's question comes from Brent M., who said, in many of your Patreon videos and podcasts, you talk about all the toys you've owned since childhood. I was wondering, are there any toys you've gotten rid of? Why? And if so, are there any that you regret parting with? Well, when I do my podcast, I have a main camera view, which if you're watching the video, you can see, and I've got some computer stuff behind me, but there's a whole nother view to the side that you don't really see, which is bookshelves and lunchboxes and some toys. I have so many toys, and my future immediate goal is to replace the shelves that are behind me with some bookshelves, and so I could get my toys and collectibles and things out of the garage, which is not doing anybody any good there, and put those up on display. So when that happens, if you watch my gaming streams, or if you watch the video versions of these shows, you'll be able to see a little bit more of that collection. But that being said, I don't have everything from my childhood. Now, there were certain things. My Star Wars things were very valuable to me, and when I was done playing with them, I always put them back in the toy box. And I was fortunate enough, I think it was probably some influence from my mom, but, not to get rid of that stuff, to put it away in storage. I had a big wooden army trunk that we had got from a garage sale, and there's a scene in the beginning of Ninja 3, The Domination, I think, where the main ninja the bad ninja goes to the cave, and he opens up this rock, and there's this display of all his weapons. And so that was the first thing I used this trunk for, was I put my ninja suit and stuff in there, and my weapons. And by the way, my weapons were a wooden sword and foam nunchucks and foam throwing stars, and then later real throwing stars. But I had it all in this trunk, so I would open it and I would be like, this is my secret ninja stash, But eventually all my Star Wars stuff went in that trunk and just went into storage. And so it was really preserved and kept together as a collection. So again, I'm really lucky to have all those things. But I did not keep all the toys from my childhood. And it's one of the things, I guess, one of those big mysteries of life is some of the ones that are gone, I don't remember what happened to them. So I've listed 3 examples here. The first is Shogun Warriors. Now, if you're not familiar with Shogun Warriors, these were I guess you would call it an action figure, but they were 2 foot tall and they were Japanese. I believe they were on the same scale. I always thought of them as people who would fight with Godzilla. But there were, I don't know, half a dozen different Shogun Warriors. They all had different names. The one of the 2 that I had was called Dragoon. It might be Dragun. It's Gun, but we always called him Dragoon. And he was this kind of samurai looking guy. He was red and blue, and he had this, a thing that shot throwing stars that attached to one wrist, and on his other wrist he could throw battle axes. Of course, these things had a million pieces that would go missing. There was another guy I had that had these yellow horns that came out of his head, and he had these missiles that snapped onto his shoulder, and then it was spring-loaded. You put the missiles in his chest, and you would press a button on the back, and it would shoot these missiles. And a lot of these guys had fists that would fly off. I think that's why I associate them with Godzilla, because that large Godzilla figure also had a fist that would fly off, So I had 2 of those. I don't remember how much they cost at the time. They couldn't have been cheap. And I have no recollection. I mean, 0 recollection as to what happened to these things. Maybe I got rid of them at a garage sale, or maybe we just threw them away, or I just don't remember. But I would love to have them today. I've looked at replacing these, and I mean, you're looking at $250 for a complete version of these guys, and that's not in the box or anything. And I kept mine in the box because they were just so tall and big, It was easy to stack them in the closet. So, yeah, that's definitely one thing that not only do I not have, but I just don't have any recollection of what happened to them. A second thing that I had a few of as a kid were Mad Balls. Now, I didn't have that many. There was one that actually looked like a baseball. I know I had that one. There was a green one where his eye was bulging out of his head, and he had stitches around the top. So I know I had that one. There might have been one other one that I had. I don't remember. I mean, I think my dad had one that looked like a mummy, and then I inherited it eventually, as kids do. Those are so small that it doesn't seem like something I would have thrown away over time, but maybe because they were kind of that foam latex, maybe they got too hot, maybe they rotted or cracked or something over time. But I don't have those anymore. And there's this picture that I have put out there of me sitting at my computer desk. I'm wearing my Don Johnson gray jacket, and I'm sitting at the Commodore. And recently I saw this picture floating around on the internet, which is fine with me. That's great. I don't care. But on the desk is that baseball Mad Ball. It's sitting there, and I remember having it on the desk. So I don't really remember what happened to it, but I would like to have some of those again. And I know that they remade them later, like in the mid-2000s. I don't know if they're identical. If they're identical, then I don't mind getting a newer one, and I wouldn't mind getting a few of those. Now, I will say a few years ago, they released a series of horror movie-related Mad Balls, and I bought them all. They were on sale at Best Buy, and I think there were 8 of them. It was like Freddy and Jason and the Predator and all these people, and I bought all of those. So it would be nice to have some of those original Mad Balls to put on display next to those. The third thing that I have on my list is Charlie McCarthy, my ventriloquist doll that I got as a child. I got this in 1981 or 1982, somewhere around there. And, I'm trying to remember what would have made a kid who was 7 or 8 years old interested in ventriloquism in the first place, you know. I remember the television show Soap was on around that time, and there was Bob and Chuck, who was one of the main characters, and he had a ventriloquist doll that he treated real as a real person, and so it could have been that. And also Edgar Bergen, who was the person who created Charlie McCarthy, made a cameo appearance in the Muppet movie with Charlie McCarthy, so it could have also been that. I remember getting the doll for Christmas. It came with a little card that told you how to do ventriloquism. Like, you would be able to learn the art of ventriloquism with instructions that are on a business card. It said, instead of using the letter W, use a V. So you could go, "Welcome to my house." That's a joke that only works on video. If you're on audio, I don't know the ventriloquism jokes will work, but anyway, I do remember losing pieces of Charlie McCarthy over the time. He had a hat, and then the hat went missing. He had shoes that came off, and I lost one of the shoes. I took it to school a few times, and I think, maybe kids took pieces off him. He had a monocle, and I lost that. And so I think, and then at some point with those cheap ventriloquist dolls, what happens is either the string that controls the jaw breaks, or the jaw itself, the hinges break. There's little pegs where it goes in. And so something happened. I do remember that it quit working. And so, you tossed it. And that's what happened to him. So I don't necessarily feel a need to replace him. Although I have occasionally I look at ventriloquist dolls on eBay. But I have not replaced him. So there you go. So there are 3 things, Brent M., that I don't have any longer from my childhood. 2 of the 3 I would like to have. I would really like to get a Shogun Warrior, and I would really like to get some of those vintage Mad Balls. Real quick, let me plug Patreon. My Patreon page is patreon.com/Rob O'Hara. All the people that have signed up there are the people that are funding the shows and making all this possible. I'm continually adding things to the show, buying things, trying to make the show better. And those are the people that are making that happen. So if you are a Patreon supporter, you get behind the scene blog posts, you get weekly videos, access to the Amiga Retro Gaming Discord server, and all sorts of other additional perks. So if you want to go to patreon.com/Rob O'Hara, you can find more. I have an 8-bit plan. That's $4 a month, which is essentially $1 per show. And then there's a 16-bit plan, which is $10 a month. And then recently I added, Patreon was trying to get me to enable yearly payments, and I did that, and a few people have changed it to yearly, which is a good way to make me keep doing this show forever, because I'll never quit. If people have signed up for a whole year's worth of podcasts, I won't stop doing it. So if you want the show to go on forever, boy, is that blackmail, you can go and just support the show for a year, and then I'm obligated. If you have feedback about this or any episode of my shows, you can email me directly at robohara@robohara.com. You can join the conversation on Facebook at facebook.com/Robcast. Follow me on Twitter at Commodore. Come chat with me on the Amigos Retro Gaming Discord, or leave a message on my podcast hotline at 405-486-YDKF. With that, the show's notes have loaded, so let's get started talking about this week's topic, which is Lego. You have to forgive me. I'm still trying to get my audio levels. That was a little loud. My apologies for that. And speaking of apologies, Seth Meyers from the show Late Night with Seth Meyers, the comedian formerly from Saturday Night Live, has been doing some stories about Legos recently on his show. And many of his listeners have been writing in, and he says, politely correcting him, that the plural of Lego is Lego. You cannot, it's not grammatically correct to say Legos. Now, you're supposed to say, I believe you're supposed to say Lego bricks. That is the way to pluralize the idea. But if you drop a Lego, one brick, you could say, oh, pick up that Lego. But if you dropped 100, you could also say, pick up that Lego. And so Seth Meyers addressed this on his show. I believe this was last week. And he basically said, I get it. He said, you are right, but I am too old. I cannot change my ways, and I cannot be saved. I believe was his, the direct quote was, I cannot be saved. So I feel like I agree with Seth Meyers. I do understand that the plural of Lego is Lego, and that you're not supposed to say Legos. I can only say that old habits die hard. I've been using the word Legos for 42 years now. So on this podcast, you may hear me use the word Legos instead of Lego. And if you do hear that, there is no need to email me. I will just tell you in advance that I'm sorry, that I'm trying my best, but it happens to the best of us. Lego is an abbreviation of two Danish words. I'm going to butcher this. I believe it's leg and goat, G-O-D-T, which means play well. Coincidentally, in Latin, it also means I put together, even though that was not the original meaning of the word Lego. Lego as a company was founded by Ole Kirk Christensen. In 1932, he began building wooden blocks that connected. So Lego was originally made out of wood. And 1934 is when he came up with the name Lego. But he wanted later, like a few years later, a decade later, he wanted to expand into plastic. And so in 1947, he bought a plastic injection mold machine. And when he bought this machine, they came and demonstrated another product which was being made, and it was from a company called Kittycraft, and they were making a product called Kittycraft self-locking bricks. Now, these were patented in the United Kingdom, but I guess that doesn't apply to old Danish Kirk Christensen. So they showed him how to make these new plastic bricks, and he said, I think I'll just make those. And so he took these plastic interlocking bricks that Kittycraft were making and changed them ever so slightly. I looked up pictures of the original Kittycraft blocks, and from a foot away, they look just like a Lego brick. But on the tops of them, the parts that, I guess you would say like the little knobs that are on the top, they have a little extra rounded piece on the top of them. It almost looks like a nipple, like from a baby bottle or something. But so and of course, a Lego, those pieces on the top are flat, and then they have the word Lego written on them. But in 1949, he changed from the wooden blocks, and they began selling these plastic versions of Legos. Now, those were not the Legos I would say that we are familiar with. They didn't snap together the right way, and they weren't strong when they connected, and so there were some tweaks made over time. But basically, what I saw was in 1958 was when the Lego that we know of Legos, like when you see a Lego, that's when those were released, was 1958. So if you saw a Lego brick from 1958, it would essentially look identical to the ones that we have. And that is when the design was filed in Denmark. It says January 28th, 1958. Now, there was an interesting story that I read that said eventually when other companies started trying to build bricks that were similar to Lego, Lego wanted to sue them, but really couldn't because they had stolen the idea from Kittycraft. And so before they proceeded with the lawsuit, they purchased Kittycraft. So then they could, honestly say that they owned the IP connected to this. So I don't know, kind of an interesting background to Lego. I was born in, well, I was going to say I was born in a house. I was born in a hospital, but the house that my parents lived in when I was born, we lived there for the first 4 years of my life. And I did not own Legos when I lived there. Mostly, I mean, you know, I was a little kid, so mostly I had little Fisher Price, the little, you know, kid type of stuff. I had the Fisher Price Sesame Street block. I had, I had little kid toys, but I didn't have Lego, you know. And so really, I don't feel like I started getting the toys that I saved later throughout my childhood and right adulthood until we moved to the house that I really grew up in, which we moved to in the summer of 1978, right before I turned 5 years old and before I started kindergarten. Now, I never had any Duplo blocks. If you're familiar with Lego Duplo, they are, I only knew them as being a larger version of Lego. And to be honest with you, I didn't realize they were actually made by Lego. Duplo blocks were introduced in 1969, and I didn't realize this either, but they are exactly twice the size of a regular Lego block. So they are twice as wide and twice as tall. So they are actually compatible with regular Lego blocks. I did not know this at all. So I do remember, like, I don't know, maybe in kindergarten, maybe going over to a friend's house, seeing Duplo blocks. But I mean, even as a little kid, I thought, well, those are for babies. So I don't know what age they're really designed for, but as a young kid, I never had them, and I always, no matter what age I was, I felt like they were for kids that were younger than I was. Now, when we moved to this house in 1978, I remember that when we got there, we didn't have a lot of our stuff unpacked. And I don't, as a kid, it's hard to judge times. Maybe this was a week or 2 weeks or whatever. But I remember that I didn't have access to a lot of my toys. And so I believe this is when my mom bought me my first Lego kit. And so as things were being moved, things like that were being unpacked, I sat in the living room at our table and played Lego. And so I have this picture. Again, if you're watching the video thing, you can see the picture of 5-year-old me sitting in the living room. And I have built what appears to be a combination between a house and a car. Early Legos were only available in 6 colors. They were black and white, red and blue, yellow, and then there were clear bricks as well. Also, on those early ones, they had green for building plates so that you could build houses and things on top of these green plates. And then I had green trees, and all the trees were shaped like Christmas trees. They were just these triangles. They didn't have fancy shapes for trees yet. I also had a lot of roof pieces. I think all the ones I had were blue, but they were these little sloped blue slopes that you could make house roofs out of. And there were little grills and grates and some arches. And I remember having window shutters. And then again, lots of wheels. But everything that I had with my very first set was really designed to either build a car or a house. So that was pretty much it. So you could build different cars or different houses, but that was kind of it. There weren't any specialized pieces for building things. Those didn't come for a few more years. Now, there was an evolution of Lego people that came, and the very first ones I had are referred to as Lego Family. If you've never seen these, it really just has like the upper torso, and it's a 2x2 block. And in the middle of that 2x2 block is a hole, and this big head snapped into it, and it had a big round head with a face on the front. And you had interchangeable, some different hair or hats. And then on the sides of that block that held the head were those little things. I don't know what you call them, but they were like interlocking, almost like a interlocking piece where you could make long arms, and then at the end of the arms, their hands were these round circles that were hollow in the middle, so that if you had like a staff or a stick, you could put it through the middle of their hand, but the top of their hand was also like a Lego piece, so you could stick things to them if they were going to hold a brick or hold, a plate or something like that. Those were released in 1974. I definitely have several of those. I still have them. They're mixed in with all my other Legos. In 1975, they moved to a much smaller figure, which scale-wise is almost the same as Lego people or Lego figures or minifigs, whatever you want to call them, that we know today. But they were much less articulate. They really consisted of sometimes 3, sometimes 4 pieces. They had, from the torso down, a set of legs, but it was all one piece. The legs didn't move. It didn't bend over, nothing. It was just, legs. And then there was the torso, which had kind of a suggestion of arms on the side, but the hands would have been in the pocket. So there were no arms. It was just a torso. And then you could put the head on the top, and it was the same size and shape of the modern minifigures, but they didn't have a face on them. So they were just kind of this faceless little thing. And then they didn't have hair back then, but some of them had hats. So you could put a hat on it. And sometimes you would use the skinnier yellow brick to be the head. And for some reason, I always thought of these guys as Laurel and Hardy, because one had the big round head and one had the smaller head. But that was it. So, you had something that looked like a person. And the one good thing about it is it's really half the scale of those early Lego people. So you didn't have to build things quite so big. I mean, when you built a car for that Lego family, it was going to be giant. But, if you built one for these little smaller figures, it was a lot better. And then the first minifigures came out in 1978. And those are essentially the figures that we know today. They have the articulated arms. They have the little hook hands, the little C-shaped hands or U-shaped hands that can snap in things. They have legs that move. They have heads that have happy faces on them. And then they have, either hair or a hat or a helmet or whatever. But those came out in 1978. Now, later, they began changing them slightly. And the way that they were changed a little bit in the future is that the faces became different. The eyes, sometimes the eyes now have a little white dot in the middle of them. Some of them have eyebrows, where they didn't have eyebrows back then. But they also changed skin tones. When the original Lego figures were made, they were made to be yellow because they said they did not want them, they didn't want them to be associated with any particular race. They were just Lego people. But later on, they did change and add skin tones. They made they lightened it for some of the characters. There are African American. They started those with basketball figures. They made famous basketball players, and of course, you'd want to have appropriate skin tone for those. So that was kind of when those changed. But that was many years in the future. I mean, the Lego figure that you think of today really started in 1978. One of the things that you had to do once you started collecting Legos is you had to keep them in something. Now, they did sell officially branded Lego boxes, and there were Lego buckets, like a pail, but I didn't have any of those things. What I had was the lid from one of those Tupperware cake carriers. So if you think of this cake carrier, the bottom is just a plastic square that has a handle that goes all the way around it. But the lid would go over a cake to protect it, right? And so if you flip that upside down, it becomes, a carryable tub. And so that's what we called it, my tub of Legos, or my Lego tub. And that's where I kept all my Legos. Some people did keep the original boxes, and when they were done, they would sort the Lego all back to where it went or whatever. I was not that kid. I was perfectly content with throwing them all in the tub. I did save the instruction booklets that came with the kits that taught you how to put things together, but But I did not save the boxes. I was perfectly happy, like I said, just throwing the Lego into this, big plastic bin, and that's where I stored them. So, I had the one or two sets. I had a set, to build a house. I had a set to build a car. So you got some wheels, you got some bricks, you got some roof pieces. Maybe if you're lucky, a window or two. But that's what I was building. I was building houses and I was building cars. And occasionally I was building cars that look like houses. Was pretty much the extent of what I was doing. And then my mom bought me this book from the store. This book was called The Idea Book, the Lego Idea Book. And the one that I had says Lego Idea Book number 2. I never had number 1. Although it's not like a sequel. You don't have to have read number 1 to know what's going on in number 2. What's going on in number 2 is Lego building, just like what happened in number 1. There's also a price on the front of the book, and it says 99 cents. And I believe this book is 64 pages long, and it is glossy paper and full color. So this is a bargain for $1. This book is filled with all kinds of crazy things that you can build. Some of them, there's no instructions. It's just pages of things that people built, Page 3 has 11 different cars on it, and they're just presented in this isometric view where you look at it and you go, all right, maybe I can build that. It wasn't like, hey, here's how to build this. It was, here's something we built. Now, some of the more advanced things that are in the book, it will show multiple steps. And in fact, on the front of the book, there's some sort of utility truck that they've built that has a ladder on top, and it's yellow and red. And it does show 4 panels where if you looked at it, you could see, oh, okay, this is how the structure was built. This is how to put this thing together. So there were some, especially the bigger models that were included or more advanced models, there were multiple steps. But it wasn't like a Lego book where it would have, 50 steps. It was like you got 3 steps if you were lucky. I don't think the book has any words in it at all. I think it's just a picture book. And what was really fun this week while researching this episode, I remembered that I had this book. I didn't remember what the name of it was, but a quick Google search turned up the entire book online, multiple places in PDF format. And I had a really good time going back and looking at these pictures. It really brought back a lot of memories. One of the concepts that this book introduced to me was this idea of building large, I don't know really how to explain it, 2-dimensional things. There are some pictures of like birds and animals and things, and they're not like a 3D thing you would build. It would be like, imagine if you just built it completely flat, like it would lay flat on your desk. So you could stand it up and it would be tall, but it would just be 1 brick thin. And I never thought of building things like that before with Lego. So it was really an eye-opening moment for me in Lego, was the idea that you could build all these different types of things. Now, I had a lot of friends that would come over and play Lego. I would also go to their house and play Lego. I had 2 different friends, both named Andy. And Andy, the one is Andy Wilrath, the Andy that I interviewed on You Don't Know Flack during the 200th episode. And I don't think he had any Lego, but when he came over to my house, we would always play Lego. We would, sit down, and my mom came up with this idea that we used the rest of the time that I had Lego. She would toss a sheet down and just, lay a sheet on the floor, and then we would dump all the Lego out, which made it so much easier to find what you were looking for. And when you were done, you would pick up the sheet and put it into whatever the container was. Later on I had a bucket or a plastic tub, and you would put it in there, and then you would just slowly pull the sheet out and all the Legos would be in there. I had shag brown carpet in my bedroom, and if you were to just put the Lego on the floor, the pieces would get lost. So this was a great way to not lose your Lego. So when Andy would come over, that's what we would do. We'd put a sheet on the floor and we would sit down there and play Lego. The other thing that I remember is coming up with the names for the different bricks. We would say like, a 1x4, Like you would say, oh, okay. Or you would say a thin 1x4. And so you would know what the difference of those. I don't know that anybody ever told us what the names of those are. I need a wing. I need we just came up with the names and you understood what those things were. So when you were digging, you're trying to build something that was, symmetrical, and you're looking for the wing that would go on the other side, you'd say, hey, you seen this wing and stuff? And I also remember digging through the pile of Legos and pulling out the pieces that I knew that I wanted. Like if I was going to build a race car, you would go through and you'd be digging and you'd find the wheels and you just pull them aside because you knew, you were going to eventually need to use those. Now with my little Lego tub, it made it portable. And I don't think that I took it to a lot of friends' houses, but one thing I do remember is taking it to the bowling alley. Now, my mom was on a bowling league, and I think every Wednesday she would go bowl for 2 or 3 hours. And she would give us a few quarters. There were a few arcade games at the bowling alley. There was a pool table. But your money would run out in a hurry. There's also a jukebox. And, if you got 4 quarters and there's 3 arcade games and a jukebox and a pinball machine, you just, that money's not going to last for 2 or 3 hours, right? So I would take my Lego and I would sit, at the little, bar top that's behind where the bowling happens. And I would sit there and build things. And one of the things I remember doing is there was a Galaxian machine over in the bowling alley's arcade. And I would go over there and look at the little aliens in Galaxian, and I would come back and try to build those with Lego. And we came up with a little way to build them that used a 2x4 and 2 of the ramp pieces for legs, and we would put little things on the top kind of for their eyes. And it was really simple, and I had 1 million of those pieces. So we would build armies of the Galaxian pieces and lay them out and try to put them in the formation of the game and things like that. So I definitely remember, trying to replicate, I guess you would say, arcade sprites at a young age with Lego, which it really lends itself to because Legos are so small and blocky, and so were those arcade sprites at the time, Now, again, those early sets that I had were pretty basic. They had building blocks. You could build square things, But a year or so later, they started releasing these space sets. I believe they started in 1978. And when the space sets started coming out, I couldn't get enough of them. I loved the space sets. First of all, I guess along those same lines of, when you bought a house set, you could build different houses, right? When you got a space set, you could build the spaceship that was intended, that the instructions would show you how to build. But you could build 1 million different kinds of space sets because you had a windshield now. You had rockets. You had wings. You had antenna. You had all these little things that could be reconfigured into 1 million different types of spaceships. I remember having the little radar dishes and the little booster rockets and all those kind of pieces. And it's funny that I associate different colors with different eras. I mean, when you think about the Lego space, I only think of gray. So I didn't have any gray Lego before the space kits came out. And all of a sudden I had a lot of gray pieces. You got a lot of gray platforms. You got a lot of specialized gray little pieces. I got a couple of those building platforms that had moon craters on them, so you could build your little space base or things like that. But again, back to the example that I was saying with the house. When you got house pieces, you could build houses. Well, with the space thing, you could build spaceships. Like, you're not going to build an ice cream truck with space wings or whatever. I don't know. I guess you could. And with Legos, you can build whatever you want, But I got multiple space things. And again, because I didn't keep them separated, you could use any of the space parts for any kind of spaceship or whatever. And I was super into all those little moon buggies. And of course, the minifigs that came with these were all astronauts, and they were all one color, right? So it would be a white astronaut, and he would have white pants and a white torso and white gloves on and the white helmet and the little white oxygen tank so that he could breathe. And then you got the red guy, and then you got, the blue guy and the yellow guy. And it was so cool to have all these different little astronauts to build your little army. And I don't remember how many of those guys I had at that time. I mean, not very many. But then I got the Lego kit that would change everything for me. And that is the Yellow Castle. Now, the Yellow Castle, I don't remember at the time, but I want to say it was like $40 or $50. It was the most expensive Lego kit, I think, at that time. And I didn't get it from my parents. I got it from a relative. And I remember it caused some sort of controversy that they had sent me such an expensive gift. But the Legoland Castle, it was originally released in 1978. Now, I don't think I got it until maybe 1980 or 81. Right off the bat, it came with 14 figures. So all of a sudden, you had a lot of medieval looking. You had soldiers, you had knights, you had all these cool pieces. The Legoland Castle, the Yellow Castle, which most people refer to it as the Yellow Castle because later they came out with castles that had that were gray and had light gray and dark gray and things like that. But it's kind of an odd choice when you see the Yellow Castle, but everybody knows it by that name. This kit has 779 pieces. It was huge. It was the biggest Lego thing I owned. I didn't like the fact that a lot of the pieces wanted you to put stickers on them. So the knights had their little tunics that went, it went over the head hole. So it draped around the figure, but there were different coats of arms. So you had to put stickers on those. You had to put stickers on the shields that the guys had. There were flags that had stickers. So I never really enjoyed that part of Lego because it made those pieces where you couldn't use them for other things. But other than that, it was just a really, really great building set. It had a working drawbridge in the front, so you could raise and lower it with this little winch that you would turn it, and there was a little string that connected to it. But what was even cooler was in the back, the towers were built in such a way that there were hinges. And so as you could open up the towers and it became more than a Lego kit. This became a playset. So once it was done, completely assembled, you had all these people, you built horses, and you would, you could play with it. And so this was like mind-blowing to me. Like I remember as a kid, this was the first thing I built with Lego that I didn't want to disassemble because, I mean, if you think about it, the fun in building spaceships was building spaceships, and you make little spaceship noises, and when you're done, you take it apart and throw it back in the bin, But this thing you could actually play with like a toy. And of course, the other thing was, what were you going to do with 779, some subset of that, yellow pieces? Like you weren't going to build yellow cars with drawbridges on them. I mean, there's only so many things that you could make, again, building type structures, things like that. But I will say one thing, like once you owned the Yellow Castle and you looked in the tub of Legos, like my tub of Legos, all of a sudden there was a lot of yellow pieces. I mean, you just added 800 pieces, most of which were yellow. So I started adding a lot of yellow to the things that I built in the future for sure. But that was, again, it was just kind of that mind-blowing moment where you go, a lot of the fun is in building and in creating, but also with this, all of a sudden, it was with playing with the final result. Now, I don't remember what all minifigures I got, but, there were 14 in that Yellow Castle set. So all of a sudden, you had 14 guys. And then you had the space people. And then there were also like the town and city. Like there was a gas station kit, there was a house kit, and you would get minifigures in those. And so, and of course you could mix and match and put different things together or whatever. But mostly with their hats or headwear or whatever, you could tell who the people were. And they all had the same face. They just had two eyes and a smile. So they were all pretty interchangeable, you know. Now, one thing that I never really thought about, and it's interesting looking back at this era of Lego, is that I don't know really how to say this, but like the astronaut, like I don't know if it's a boy or if it's a girl, you know. It's just an astronaut, you know, and but you kind of assume they were boys. I did. And you had all these people in the castle. You kind of assumed those were boys. And then you had all these people working in the gas station, and they had hats and they had all this, and I assumed they were boys. Then they released things for girl minifigs, but they all had hair. So, you know, if it was someone who worked or had the job, it seemed like those were male figures. If it was the female figure, they just had hair, long hair, and you would go, oh, that's a girl Lego. And it's just kind of an interesting thing. Like, it's something that I never really thought about. But it's an interesting thing that when you think about that, was something that was kind of inbred into our childhood, that the men Legos all had the jobs, and then the women Legos figures just had long hair. Like they weren't identified with a job or something. And so I think the Legos that they do today are much more aware of that, but back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, that wasn't I won't say as much of a concern, but people just, it wasn't an awareness issue. So that's something that has changed over time. Another cool thing about the minifigs is that it didn't matter if you got duplicates. You know, I think a lot about Star Wars. I associate things with Star Wars because I was such a big Star Wars kid. And there were figures that it was okay to have multiples of, like stormtroopers. You know, there's a lot of stormtroopers in Star Wars. So if you got a second one or a third one or whatever at your birthday party, you'd go, all right, cool. You know, I got a Death Star. I can put a stormtrooper in there. It's not a big deal, and have 2 or 3. But if you got 2 Han Solos or 2 Lukes, it's like, what am I going to do with this? Like, you can't have 2 Lukes at the same time, you know. But these Lego minifigures, none of them had names. It wasn't like, you know, Bob the astronaut. It was just Red Astronaut. And so if you had 2 red astronauts, you built a ship for 2 red astronauts, or one guy stayed at the base. Or if you had 100 red astronauts, it just didn't matter. So that was that was a good way that they did that, where you weren't worried about duplication of the minifigures. I also feel being somewhat obsessed at the time with the accessories that came with minifigures. You know, again, you had those figures that worked in the gas station, like there were wrenches and little hammers. The space figures, the outer space astronauts, had walkie-talkies like CBs, and they had a metal detector, some sort of thing. And they even had guns. They had laser blasters and stuff, which I think they've got away with over time. And just all these things that you could. Oh, and of course, the knights, right? They had swords, and they had lances, and they had shields, and so they're just a lot of little accessories, which I probably should have kept in a separate, like a sandwich baggie or something. But I just remember digging through Lego a lot, trying to find the pieces that I was looking for. Now, the good thing about Lego was that all Lego kits worked with all other Lego kits. So if you got 2 space kits, you could just bash them together and make bigger space thing, or a bunch of small space things, or whatever. Or you wanted to use bricks from a house or whatever. It just didn't matter. Everything connected with everything. But there were a few off-brand, and I say off-brand, what I should just say is just not compatible with Lego, and one of those things was Tente, Tente. Tente came out in 1972, so it was long after Lego had been established, and they specialized in commercial and military vehicles. I had a couple of different boats. I had this big warship, and I found a picture of the one that I had. It has little like rescue boats that plug in the scale for a lot of the Tente kits are different than Lego. It's much smaller. So, if you imagine like a Lego, there would be an entire, helicopter that fit on this Tente boat that covers like 2 little Lego squares, So it was much smaller, so you could build more detailed or more, larger scale things. I do have a memory of building this Tente boat and taking it out. We had one of those kiddie pools in our backyard and taking it out there and like floating it around and stuff, which is something I don't think I would have done with Legos. But even if you got the crappiest Lego kit for your birthday, you could toss it in with the other Legos and who cares? It's more Legos, right? But when you got Tente, they didn't work with Legos. They didn't quite fit. They didn't snap together, and you couldn't use those pieces for other stuff. And so you didn't want to mix that stuff in with your Legos. So I had a little separate thing for the Tente pieces. And that was like, it's like that birthday when someone gives you a shirt and it doesn't fit, or a sweater or something. You're just like, thanks for the Tente, Grandma. I mean, I'm sure it's some, well-meaning relative that bought you something that they don't know the difference between Lego and Tente or whatever. Or they didn't care, right? They're like, he'll build that. Tente was in business from 1972 to 1993. And there's lots of Tente available on eBay. I looked at it, but I don't have enough of a draw towards it to want to pick any up. Now, I told you that when my friends would come over, we would play Lego. Andy would come over. And one of the things we would do is we would draw up colors. So I would say, okay, I call gray and yellow. And Andy would say, okay, I call red and blue. And so you could only build things using those colors. Of course, I, being having the house advantage and the owner of the Legos, would always call gray, because gray got you all the cool outer space pieces, But Andy liked to build buildings and things like that. So red and blue was just fine for him. And then Andy's little brother, Matt was in between ages. He was older than my younger sister, but he was younger than Andy and I. And so sometimes he would play with the girls. Sometimes he would come in and play with us. And when he came in and played with us, we would always be mean to him. And so I remember we would give him the worst colors. I remember one time saying, you can only build things in white and see-through colors. So, we would just make it as miserable as possible for him. Or we would say, you have to use green, which meant that you only got, the platforms and trees. And he would try to build a car that was all white with trees on the hood. And we were like, what are you doing? But so I definitely remember a lot of that. Now, one of the things about Lego is that when you got these different kits, like the space kits or the castle kit, sometimes you got pieces that were unique to that kit only. And my other friend, Andy, who lived down the street, had a kit called the Command Center. It was the Lego Space Command Center. It had this giant radar dish on the top, and it was blue, and it had these astronauts inside. There was a little buggy, and it was kind of like a little command thing. It was built on one of the gray bases, one of the moon crater bases, but it had this one piece, and it was like a big giant big screen TV that had a picture of the moon and an astronaut and stuff. It was the coolest Lego piece. And we were playing Legos at his house one day, and he had left the room or something, and I took that piece. And we were probably 8, and I'm 47, and I still feel guilty about it. I should mail it to him. I should take that piece and mail it back to him right now. I probably still have it, But I was I just love that piece so much. And I put it in my pocket, and I went home. And I remember he came over one time, and he was like, hey, I lost that piece, and now it's here. And I was like, oh, I must have got it with some kit. And it only came with that one kit, and I didn't have that kit, And so I know that he knew that I took it. I really, now that I think about it, I feel bad. And the worst part was I couldn't use it. Like if he was around, I couldn't build anything with that because they didn't even know that it was there. I think he did, eventually call me out, like he busted me with it. And I was like, no, I just found that one piece somewhere magically in the dirt. But yeah, I was rotten. So Andy, if you're listening out there, I'm sorry. Now, one of the things about our rules as far as building Lego is that when you were done, that was it. Like when we were done playing Lego for the day, you took everything you built, you took it apart, and you threw it back in the tub. Now, there may have been slight exceptions, like if you built a small buggy or a small car, you might toss it into the top of the tub. But anything that was big, it got broken up and thrown back in there, So that was one thing that was about Lego was you enjoyed the experience. You built it, you played with it, but when it was over, that was it. It was not like something that you put up on a shelf and you saved or whatever. You took the pieces apart and then, you would use them the next time. Now, there were a couple of different things that I used Lego for as I started getting a little older. This was like 5th grade, I guess, 4th, 5th grade, somewhere around there. And one of the things I did was I made a movie. We had a video camera, VHS camera, and I made a Star Wars movie one time. And so I got figures out and I made some backgrounds. I drew backgrounds on paper and I taped them to a box. And I wanted a scene where I had speeder bikes flying through the forest, but I didn't own the speeder bike toy. So I made one out of Lego, and then I made a little cardboard cross and taped it together and put strings on it like a marionette thing, like a thing that controlled marionettes. And I put strings that went down and snapped them in between blocks. And so I made this kind of marionette controlled speeder bike, and then I put a real figure on top of it, a real Star Wars. I had the biker scout, so I put the figure on top, and then I would set up the camera and I would fly this thing past the camera. And if you moved it fast enough, you couldn't tell that it was Lego. I mean, it just kind of looks like a big blob thing, but anyway, there was a scene in my movie where the speeder bike was going to explode. And so I built an even smaller, a really small version of the speeder bike, and I didn't snap it together, and I taped strings to all the different pieces. And so then when I hit record, I grabbed all the strings and pulled them apart so all the pieces would kind of tumble apart. Of course, it didn't work very well, but in my head, I was making models and blowing them up. And, in my head, you would not be able to distinguish this from Hollywood special effects. This is another picture that I do have on the video. And if you look at it, it very obviously looks like a small pile of Legos with strings on it. So in my head, in my imagination, it must have looked better than it actually did. But it didn't look very good in the final film. One other thing that I used Legos for was in 5th grade, we had signed up for a project, and one of the things that you could do was build a maze for a mouse to run through. And so, some of the people were like, oh, my dad is going to help me do woodworking or this, that. But I just thought, well, I could build a maze out of Lego. And so I got one of those building plates, and I built a little maze out of Lego. And I don't know, I made it 3 or 4 bricks tall or whatever, and took it to school. And one of my classmates had a hamster or something and brought it to school, and we were going to let this hamster run through people's mazes. And not very many people built mazes, 3 or 4 people, I think. But when I got mine out, I just remember underestimating how large a hamster is. Because this thing just walked over the top of my maze. It wouldn't even fit in the stupid walls that I made. I had made a maze, I think, to the proper scale if the actual minifigures had a pet hamster. If they had a hamster, it would have worked great. But a real-life hamster, this didn't work at all. They just walked right over the top of it. So, but it was a great looking maze. Like I remember spending a lot of time building the maze, but it didn't work at all. Now, the funny thing about Lego is I remember playing with Andy building things, and even like fifth grade. I mean, this was fifth grade when I had built this maze. This was probably fourth or fifth grade when I made that Star Wars movie where I had built the speeder bikes. But I became friends with Jeff in seventh grade, and I don't think that I ever played Legos with Jeff. In fact, I'm sure that we never played Lego, together. So I guess it was an age thing where, like, in grade school, up until grade school, it was cool. And then by the time, you hit seventh grade, Lego was not cool at all. Now, one of the things that Lego tried to do to make Lego cool, I suppose, is they released a series of commercials. And in 1987 was the one that I remember, and it starred Zach. Zach. He's the Lego Maniac. So in 1987, we got Zach the Lego Maniac. And fortunately, there were no kids at my school named Zach at the time, but I imagine across America, every kid named Zach was referred to as a Lego Maniac. I don't know if Lego got complaints, or I got a feeling that it was hard to relate to because there weren't very many people, I don't think, named Zach. Because in 1989, they did another one, and it became Jack. And this was Jack the Lego Maniac. Now, I was too old in 1989. In 1989, I was working at a pizza place, so I wasn't playing Lego, but you were definitely aware if you watched Saturday morning cartoons, which I did when I was still 16. I got up and, watched my Saturday morning cartoons. But these commercials, with Zach and Jack, the Lego Maniac, were, pretty prevalent. And they were very, very 80s with, spiked hair and neon signs and all the stuff that you think of as being 80s. In the early 90s, they did these again, but there wasn't a name. So there was no Zach and there was no Jack. It was just a generic maniac, I suppose. So they just referred to this kid as the Lego Maniac, but he didn't have a name. So maybe kids named Jack and Zach. Or what if you were named Jack Flack? That would have been awful. Maybe they got complaints or something. So eventually they just went to a regular Lego Maniac. So I do remember these commercials. You got to think, though, that, in the late 80s and early 90s, if you go back to when I got into Lego, what's Lego competing with, right? I mean, Lincoln Logs or Erector sets or whatever, whatever you would get kids at the time. And then very quickly, they're competing with Atari. I mean, in the late 80s, now you're competing with, Nintendo and things like that and Game Boys. So they really had to up their image to make it look or seem a little cooler. But you only have to imagine that that they were struggling, to remain relevant at the time. Now, in 1995, I took a work trip to Minnesota. And while I was there, I stopped by the Mall of America. And the Mall of America is the biggest mall in the United States. It's not the biggest in North America. I've been to that one as well. It's in Canada. But the Mall of America is gigantic. I remember one of the stories I like to tell is when I walked in, I needed some batteries or a battery for my camcorder. And I asked a guy if there was a Radio Shack. And he said, yes, there's one on the east end at the first floor and the west end on floor 3. So there were 2 Radio Shacks. This mall was just gigantic. But as I was walking around the mall, I went to where this escalator was. And as I started going down, I became even with the head of a Lego dinosaur. And as I went down to the next floor, I could see gigantic Lego creations of dinosaurs. And I had never seen anything like this before. I had never seen larger than life scale Lego creations. And so this was at Legoland at the Mall of America. And boy, I mean, it was life-changing. I don't know, life-changing is an exaggeration, but I hadn't been into Lego in a long time. I mean, probably 10 years, I hadn't messed around with Lego. And so I didn't know that these places existed. I didn't know that a Legoland existed. I didn't know that they still sold. I didn't know they sold Lego anywhere but Toys R Us and Walmart. That's where I got my Lego from. So it was really cool to walk around and see all the creations. And I remember there was a lot of detail. Like they had built tiny little eggs that were unhatched, and then you would see like an egg that was hatched made out of Lego and little footprints and stuff. Just a lot of neat detail. And I didn't really think that Lego was making a resurgence or anything. I thought this was just kind of a one-off place, but it was really cool just to kind of revisit Lego at that time, Now, in the early 2000s, and this was around the time I definitely, I don't remember if Mason was born. If he had, maybe he was like a year old or something like that. But it was right around the time that my son was born. And we had gone to garage sale day, which was the neighborhood garage sale day in my old neighborhood where everybody would have garage sales. And I went up to a garage sale, and this was pretty early in the day. This was like the second or third garage sale we went to. And I saw the largest collection of Legos I had ever seen. Probably 15 gallons, if that's almost a 20-gallon tub full of Lego. And they wanted $200 for the Lego, which is, honestly, probably worth it at the time. Lego's expensive, but also I didn't have $200. I had $100. And so I told the people, I said, listen, you're not going to sell $200 worth of Legos on garage sale day. Like nobody is walking around here with $200, but I will pay you $100 right now. I've got $100 cash. I will pay you. I'll carry that off. And we talked about it and they agreed. So I bought, now I don't know how many Lego I had at the time. If you wanted to compare it, maybe half that. So maybe I had 10 gallons worth of Lego, and then all of a sudden now I have another 20. So I ended up getting a 28-gallon tub for my Lego, which is large, and it is full. That's how many Lego, and I still have these. But the fun thing about this was it was a lot of new types of Lego that I hadn't seen. The last new Legos I had got were in the early 80s. And I remember right on top, of course, they had also included all the building books. So you had all these books, and they had, right on top was this pirate ship, and it had big masts, and there were pirates and little treasures that had gold coins in them, like treasure chests and trees that I hadn't seen. And it was kind of fun to go home and mess with that and take try to rebuild stuff and things like that. I wasn't really into Lego at the time. I was really buying this to build a collection of Lego for my kids. It was a good investment. It was definitely a good investment. Now, my kids were still pretty young. Morgan wasn't born when I bought these, and Mason was really, young. But so he didn't get into Lego right off the bat. But the thing that I got him into were Lego video games. Now, this was around the early 2000s. I remember when I got an Xbox, I had the Lego Star Wars. We also played Lego Indiana Jones. We bought a Honda Odyssey in 2003. And the Honda Odyssey had a rear drop-down television screen, and the television screen also had RCA inputs. And so we went on a road trip one time, and I believe this is in 2005 or 2006. So Mason was like 4 or 5 years old, and I got in the back seat with him. And we got back there, and I hooked up the Xbox, and we plugged it into the little inverter, and we played Star Wars Legos for like 2 hours on a road trip. We had a great time. I don't think my wife was that happy that we were in the back playing Xbox while she was driving us across country. But yeah, I had a great time. So that was more his gateway into Lego was not necessarily playing Legos as a kid, although he did play some Lego, but it was the Lego video games and later on some of the movies and stuff that really were the draw for him into that world of Lego. Now, we have several local malls here in Oklahoma City, and one of them is called Penn Square Mall. And I looked up the date of this. It was 2009 when Penn Square Mall got its own Lego store. Now, I had not seen Legos for sale in a long time. I mentioned that Mall of America where I had seen Legoland, but that was it. I didn't have any reason to be buying Legos, as a young adult. And so when they opened this Lego store, we were in the mall. They were having a grand opening, and I went there with Mason and my wife, the whole family. And I was amazed at all the advancements that Lego had made, which sounds dumb. But in my head, I was like, well, Lego only comes in 8 colors, And just to go there and see, now they have pink Lego. Now they have green Lego, and not just for the building, but, for normal blocks. And orange and all these colors that I had never seen before. They also had, this was around the time when the Star Wars box sets were out, and I also had no idea how expensive Legos were. They had the Millennium Falcon, and I think maybe the Death Star. I think the Death Star was $500, $700, something like that. I mean, it was just really, really expensive. And I had no idea. That Legos cost so much. So we had a great time looking around, but I don't think we bought. I don't think we bought much on that trip. Now, one of the things that I did end up buying, and this was in 2010 from that same store, were these Star Wars Lego figures that were mounted to magnets. So they had these 3 packs of figures, and there were 9 packs in all. They made 27 different figures. And each pack, and I think they were $10, something like that. I mean, I spent some money because I did eventually. Well, I don't want to jump forward in the story, but I bought them, and you would get 3 different figures. Like there was one kit that had Han Solo and Biker Scout and one of the Ewoks, and they were snapped onto, which is an important detail. They were snapped onto another brick which had a magnet on the back. And so you could use this as a kitchen magnet, but the figures came off the blocks. They were not permanently attached. Now, I don't know why Lego started doing this. Maybe people were abusing the system. They were buying these and then selling the figures or something. But in 2011, the next year, they began gluing them and permanently attaching them to the magnet. So you could no longer just remove the figure off the magnet. But so the funny story about this is I had a coworker at the time. I had recently moved positions, and I was brought to a new position, kind of like what we would call as a golden boy. I came pretty highly recommended to this new position, and there was a guy who was outranked me for sure, and just didn't care for me. I mean, it's what it made. That's how I felt. Let's put it that way. That's how I felt. So when I would do something, he would correct me. Oh, well, you could have done this. And I would go, okay. But one of his things is he was definitely one of those guys where he would say, like, oh, well, I've done this better, or I would have done it better, or I would do this. And I'll give you a great example. Was a few months after I started, and some of my coworkers were pointing this out. They were like, did you notice? I'm like, yeah, of course I noticed, that he's doing this. We had a Thanksgiving dinner at work, and everybody had to sign up to bring something. So somebody had signed up for turkey, and somebody had signed up for mashed potatoes. And I signed up and put rolls, or dinner rolls, I think is what I wrote, dinner rolls. So it said Rob and dinner rolls. And then this guy came and signed up right below me, and it says, he wrote dinner rolls, and then in parentheses put homemade. And it was such a slight little jab that he was bringing the same thing as me. After I had already signed up, but his were homemade. And we joked about that for years. I would say like, oh, I got a new laptop, and somebody go, yeah, but is it homemade? We referenced this for a long time. So anyway, I had bought 3 of those magnets, and I had put them up. I had these really old school metal shelves in my cube, and I'd put the 3 of them up, and this guy came by my cube, and he said, oh, yeah, I've got a lot of those. And I was like, yeah, I got a lot of them too. He's like, oh. He goes, I don't know. I probably got more of them. I go, oh, maybe. And so over the weekend, I went to the Lego store, and I bought all of them. There were 27 different figures, and I bought them all. I literally probably look like a maniac. Kids are trying to shop, and I'm pushing them out of the way. I'm like, no, that one's got Greedo. I need that one, And I went to work early Monday, and I put them all up. I had 27 Lego figures stuck to magnets all the way around. And he had come by, and he's like, yeah. He goes, that's a lot of them. He goes, I'm sure that I have more. And I go, you can't. You can't have more because I have them all. So you can only have as many as I have, but you can't have more than me. And he really took it personal. By the way, I spent like $300 something just to be able to say that, but it was worth it. But yeah, he was that kind of guy. But you know what? At the end of the day, I ended up with a lot of Lego minifigures, so I feel like it was worth it. I feel like it all came together. In March of 2014, we took a family road trip, down through New Orleans and straight across east, and we ended up going to Disney World in Florida. And we went to the Legoland Lego store that is at Disney World. And it was so cool. I really liked it. They had a lot of those full size or even bigger than life Lego sculptures. I'm assuming they're glued together or something because they were out where kids could touch them. There was a life-size Hulk that was done in the style of a Lego minifig, I guess, with that kind of has the Lego look on the face. And there's a picture of my kids with those. I remember there was a Woody from Toy Story, I think a Buzz Lightyear. There were some other things that were there. But, it was really cool. And I remember being there and telling my kids, like, I'll buy you whatever you want. Like, if you want Lego, I will get you Lego, And I think I ended up getting Mason a SpongeBob SquarePants. It was SpongeBob's house, like a pineapple, and it was a Lego kit. But I remember looking at it, and it was so much a toy. It was still Lego, and you still assembled it, but way more than the Yellow Castle. It had all these different interactive things or whatever, and it just kind of, that was my first inkling that Lego had changed, that it wasn't just about building things, that all of a sudden it had to have all these new features, When we left Lego World, by the way, outside, they have this thing that looks like the Loch Ness Monster that is in the water, and it's all made of Lego. I thought that was the coolest thing. I probably took 100 pictures of that thing. With me in front of it, the kids in front of it. It's one of those, like a vacation thing when you're going through vacation photos and you go, why do I have 50 pictures of that? But I guess it was just because I was so excited to see it out there. But if you've never seen it, it's a really cool thing that they have right outside of Legoland out there. Now, I have some pictures of my kids playing with Legos, and this was after I had bought all those Legos from the garage sale. So now, in a way, I feel like it's almost too many Legos. Like when you're a kid, it's like anything. We've talked about this for video games. Like if you give somebody 3 Atari games, they'll pick the best one and they'll play it. But if you give them 100, they're going to pick the best 2 or 3 and just play those. And none of those other ones are going to get played. And so by giving somebody, 25 gallons of Legos or whatever, it's almost too much. Like you don't have to be as creative or problem solving skills that we had as kids, because now there was all these specialized pieces. And I don't really remember the kids and I playing, that many Legos together. I mean, like, I don't remember us doing it that many times, maybe half a dozen. One of the things about it was my kids had a really hard time with taking the Legos apart when we were done. They wanted to save their stuff. And I was like, no, you take it apart, but that concept was new to them of, I'm not going to be able to keep this, And so we came up with a compromise, which was we would take digital pictures. So every time that we were done building a spaceship or whatever, we would take a picture of it. And I would say, okay, now you've got a picture of it. We'll remember what you built, but now we need the pieces for next time, And maybe part of that was because I had so many Legos. Like when you have, 100 Legos and you build a house, like you're going to need those bricks next time. But when you've got, thousands and thousands of bricks, you don't feel like you need to disassemble what he did today to build something tomorrow because there's so many bricks left over. But that was just the way I had done it. And so, and maybe that was wrong, but that was the way I felt. Like these aren't, for saving. We build it, we have a good time, and then we took a picture, and then we take them apart, so that we have bricks the next time. I do remember my kids weren't really into this, but I had a nephew who got into Ninjago, which is a Lego TV show that has ninjas, I guess, but they're not really traditional ninjas. I mean, I looked up these Ninjago playsets, and they got spaceships and race cars and things like that. So they're definitely not the ninjas of my childhood. But I remember he asked for a Lego Ninjago playset or building set for his birthday, and I was really excited. I was like, "Oh, he wants it!" And it was basically a like a soccer. Well, it wasn't like soccer. It was like foosball, and there were sticks that went through, and you put all the people on the sticks and turn it, and there was a little soccer ball, and you hit it back. So once you had built it, you made a foosball thing. And again, it's this idea of, you have to build something with Lego, but then it has to do something. And that is what changed from generations. When I was a kid, you built it, and it was enough just to look at, and then, I mean, the fun was in the building, but it seems like, and not to come off as the old man, but that now it's you build it and then it also has to do something. So, and it probably does have to compare to, or to compete with other kid toys. Lego has come out with some interesting marketing ideas throughout the years to try to stay relevant. I mentioned the Zach, the Lego Maniac, and Jack, the Lego Maniac. But I remember there was a marketing thing that came out on the internet for a while, and it was these really minimalistic pictures of just a few colored blocks standing together. And the first one I saw had The Simpsons, but the first one was just like 2 blocks of blue, then 2, on the bottom, and then 2 blocks of white, and then 2 blocks of yellow. And when you look at that, I mean, it's literally just a little tower of 3 colors, but then next to it is a stack that's taller, that's green, and then yellow, and then a big blue stack. And you go, oh, that's Homer Simpson, that's Marge Simpson. And then based on the colors, you could tell who the other people were. And they released a series of these little ads. There was one for Bert and Ernie. There was a series where they had the Smurfs. There was one that had Donald Duck with Huey, Dewey, and Louie next to him. And then one of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. There may have been others, but those are the ones that I remember seeing at the time. And I thought that was a really good idea because they're so minimalistic. It's just a little splash of color or the right ratio, and you can, really present this idea of a figure with just a few blocks, and it has just the right amount of nostalgia, I think, for people that are my age to want to buy Legos for their kids, which is, what a lot of this was about for me was buying and saving Legos so that my kids could have the same toys, that I had as a kid. Now, starting all the way back, a lot of people have been during the pandemic have been working from home, but I've been working from home multiple days a week for almost 10 years now. And there was a point in time pretty early on, I was assigned to a specific project where I didn't have stuff to do. I was only reactive. I wasn't proactive. It was a position where I had to monitor things, and if something went wrong, I had to take action. But that was what I was doing. And so I had a lot of downtime when things were going okay. And I came up with this idea. I don't really remember why, but this was after I'd bought all those Legos and I'd put them all in. And I was just thinking, there's so many Legos in this giant tub I've never seen. And so what I decided to do was sort all of my Lego by color. So I went down to Dollar Tree or Dollar General and I bought some of those plastic shoebox tubs. These were actually a little bit bigger than those traditional ones. And I sat at my desk, and sometimes I would be on meetings and sometimes I would be watching something online. Like training or something. But I set up all those shoeboxes on the floor, and I would scoop up a handful of Lego, and I would sit there and just deal them like cards. Toss the yellow one, toss the white one, toss the gray one, toss the red one, and put them in those things. And this took me like over a week. But I wasn't doing it full time. I wasn't always doing it during the day. I did it at night a lot, just when I was sitting in this one particular room. It was just kind of a mindless activity to sit there and do. And when I was done, I had them all sorted out into different colors. And I thought this would be great when we play Lego. And then we never played Lego again. I never played Lego when we had them all separated out. And when we moved from that house to this house, I saw all those stacks of tubs, and I went and got the big tub that I had originally had, and I dumped them all back in and mixed them up. So it was a fun activity, and I will say that the takeaway, the enjoyment that I got is that I've touched every Lego brick that I own. I've touched every single one, I also did separate out all the minifigs. I don't remember, and I think all the accessories at the same time. And I put those in a couple of large sandwich bags, like Ziploc bags, just to keep those separate because, I don't know, for some reason it just seems better to have those separate. But all the building blocks, at the end of the day, I just tossed all back in. It was a fun project, but not long-serving, I would say. Now, in 2014 is when the Lego movie came out, and I took my kids to go see it. We went and saw it, I think, in 3D. And there was a big resurgence for Lego at that time. There was a lot of new Lego kits and a lot of interest. And of course, you've got, again, that crossover of nostalgia. So, in the Lego movie, when you show, Batman and things like that, like the kids go, oh, I love that. But also, they've got the blue astronaut. They've got some of the old kits. And so when you're an adult and you grew up with Legos, you go, oh, yeah, I remember that. So I do remember really enjoying the Lego movie. There are a lot of things in my life that I have bought and kept in the box. Action figures that I didn't open, or Star Wars things that I didn't open. But I never felt that way about Legos. They were selling Lego Star Wars kits at the time. But I've never felt that way about Lego. I never wanted to buy a Lego kit and not open it. I've always felt that Legos were for playing, no matter what. Now, I did buy some Star Wars Lego kits that I opened and then kept the box, but the boxes are empty. The Legos are in with all the other Lego because that's, again, I was just not a believer in putting Legos somewhere where kids couldn't play with them, I think the Lego movie is what led it. Well, they had some of this stuff predates it. But another gateway for my kid was all the Lego Star Wars animated movies. There's the Yoda Chronicles, which we had seen. There was Droid Tales. A year or two ago was the Lego Star Wars Holiday Special, which I did on a podcast with Rick Reynolds on his Holiday Special podcast. And then I watched again later with my kids, and it was a fun, it was kind of a time traveling thing where they got Lego, or they got, stuff from all the different Star Wars generations and got it all mixed together and stuff like that. So, again, that seems to be more of what my kids are into. They liked the Lego movies. They liked the Lego video games. They just didn't like building with Legos all that much. Now, in 2015, we went on another family vacation, and this time we went up to Wisconsin. And while we were there, we drove through Minnesota and we went to the Mall of America for the second time. Second time for me, first time for everyone else in the family. And the Legoland was still there, but it was greatly expanded. It was all different. And I remember going up in one area, they had a transformer type robot that was more than 2 stories tall. There was a giant helicopter that was hanging from the ceiling. There was all kinds of stuff there. And it really, it got me excited, and the kids ran around and looked at stuff. And I was like, if anybody here wants Lego, let me know and I'll buy it. But they didn't want it. It was, and again, in 2015, Mason would have been 14. So, he would have outgrown that stuff, and it was never really Morgan's thing. So they had a good time while we were there, and it was fun to see all the stuff, the giant models that they had put together, but it didn't really spark anything in them for playing Lego. Now, in 2017, I bought a 3D printer, and my friend Andy was interested in it. He wanted to know how it worked, and his boys, especially his older boy, who's I think he just turned 12, so he might have been 9 or 10 at the time, but he was interested in 3D printing and wanted to learn about it. And I said, well, come over and we'll print something and I'll show you how it works. And so I went on one of the online websites where you could download printable 3D models, and I found a printable 3D model of Lego minifigures. Now, with my printer at the time, the print was kind of rough, but you did get all the separate pieces. I mean, you got each leg, you got the torso, you got the hands, the head, and when you're done, you put it all together and you have a Lego person. And so I had already printed one before they came, and I had started the second one, and they came and they got to see it finish printing. And when we were done, we popped it off, and they got to him, and Andy has 2 sons, and so the 2 kids got to assemble their own Lego people, and they thought that was so neat. Now with my printer, it's not injection molding. It's not going to be completely smooth like a normal Lego figure. So I don't think home 3D printers, like the technology that I have, it's not going to put Lego out of business anytime soon. But it is an interesting concept to be able to print maybe a replacement piece or an extra minifigure, if you wanted to maybe sand it down and try to smooth it a little bit or something like that. But I wouldn't say that you would ever mistake the ones that I printed for an actual Lego minifigure. That's a good way to put it. Now, one of the things I've talked about, if you're on my Patreon, I do a weekly video called Rando Rob, and I record a video. And on that show, I pick something out of my room, something that I've bought or purchased, and I talk about it. And one of the episodes I did a few weeks ago was about these clocks that I have. I have one that's a stormtrooper, and I have one that's Yoda. And they look like Lego figures, but they're tall. They're, a foot tall maybe. And in the middle, where their stomach ought to be, as the song goes, is a large digital clock. And I bought these, both of them, the Yoda one and the Stormtrooper, when I was visiting Buffalo, New York, actually Tonawanda, which is right outside Buffalo, which is where Sean, my podcast partner on Throwback Reviews, lives. And so I'd gone up there, we were visiting, and we had gone to a antique store, and they had these. And I really like when I am able to purchase something that scratches multiple itches, And so these are giant Lego figures, and so I love them for that, right? But the better part is that when I look at them, I think of Sean, and I'm reminded of that trip, And so that's, again, something that I always like if you can, if you buy a Star Wars figure and you go, okay, well, I have thousands of Star Wars figures, but that's another one. But if you buy something that's Boba Fett that's also a back scratcher, and you go, well, that's cool because now it's got a function. It does something as well as remind you of something, And so that's what I really like about these two Lego figures is not necessarily, I mean, I do like that they are Star Wars Lego, but I mean, really, this is 3 inches if you think about it because they're Lego, they're Star Wars, and they remind me of my buddy Sean. So it was a 3-way win as far as I'm concerned. Now, when I got back from that trip, and this was probably 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, they opened a new store near me called the Container Store. And if you've not been to one of these, they have containers for everything you can imagine. They have organizers for your closet. They have shelves for your kitchen. They have just, anything you can imagine that has to do with containers. They have. That's why it's called the Container Store. It's quite literally why it's called that. They also have some unique containers for desktop organization, school, work, things like that. One of the things they had were these large Lego bricks. I mean, they're really large. I say really large. I mean, they're, 8 inches by 2 to 3 inches, something like that. But they're hinged and they open up, they're hollow, and you can put things inside. And I bought one of those, and I keep all my loose SD cards. I used to keep all my USB sticks in there, but it's hard to organize them. I don't have that many SD cards. But I mean, this would hold probably 200 SD cards, and I only have a dozen. But it's really cool because it sits here and it's red and it looks like a Lego, and it reminds me of those, of Lego. So I just enjoy looking at it. But the other thing that I bought there was a giant hollow Lego minifigure head. And the top of the head comes off and it's hollow. And I think I have, I used to keep my keys and wallet in it. There's something else in it now. I don't remember what I put in it. But again, it's that kind of reminder. And like I said about the action figure or the Lego minifigures that are also a clock, is that it serves 2 purposes, right? Like it is a storage device. You could put things in it, put it on a shelf, and you go, oh, that's, I could keep things in there. But when I see it, I'm also reminded of Lego. So now I've just put a picture on the slideshow. You can see the giant Lego head with his head kind of popped off. Now, I like to do a lot of my shopping at Dollar General, and I like to do a lot of my shopping at Big Lots. I am not in charge of buying groceries for my house, but if I need school supplies or I need, something for the backyard and things like that, I like to go to those bargain type places. I don't like going to Walmart and having to walk, 20 miles. It's a hike from where I park just to be able to get in and then to go in. I just can't find anything in those stores. I like a smaller store. So I remember not too long ago, I was in Big Lots and I saw these Lego kits and they were much cheaper than I was expecting. I had seen the ones at the Penn Square Mall at the Lego store. I'd seen them at the Mall of America, and even a moderately sized kit, would be $20, $30, some of them $50, or some of them $100. And at Big Lots, they had this one. It was a giant warship, and I figured it would be $100, and it was like $20 or $25. And I was like, wow, that's a bargain. And I looked at it, and the company was not Lego. The company was called Brick Tech. Now, the Lego logo is universally known. You see the word Lego, it's surrounded by yellow, and then it's on a red background. Well, the Brick Tech was also on a red background, but a little, it's a different font. But then there's a little thing at the bottom that says compatible with the leading brand of building bricks. So I think maybe they've got sued, so they can't even say the word Lego. You can't say compatible with Lego, but you can say you're compatible with the leading brand, which, by the way, I mean, I would think the margin between the leading brand and the second leading brand would be very large. But, I never owned any off-brand Lego before, and I don't know that I'm necessarily against it. I have seen online where you can buy now, either from Lego or from other people. Like you could go on eBay and type in like 5-pound bag of Legos, and you could just buy a big thing of Legos. If you want to build, I know people do this, like if you're wanting to build a model of, I don't know, of the White House, you can order 20 pounds of white Legos. You know, you could get something that would be color specific to what you're trying to build. So I don't know that I would be against buying these generic Lego, or, you know, I mean, calling it generic Lego. I would say an off-brand that's compatible with Lego. I just never really thought about it, you know, but I guess that option is out there. And I have actually, I've been in Big Lots before and seen these and thought, like I was out for lunch one day for work, and I thought, I should just buy that and go back to work and put that together this afternoon. But so anyway, I wanted to wrap this up. The last thing that I had on here says, where are my Legos today? Well, they are literally in my garage. At the last house, other than the time when I'd sorted them out, they sat in a closet for 8 years. Like, I don't think we ever played with them at that house. We only played with them at the previous house. And so when you've got something like this that's so nostalgic, it's hard to part with. When my kids were going to the daycare, I had a bunch of puppets, and I don't remember if I did an episode on puppets. I don't remember, but I, eventually I donated all my puppets to the daycare. Like, what am I going to do? I'm in my 40s. I'm not doing a puppet show for people, and my kids didn't want to play with puppets, and not the puppets I had when I was a kid. So there's nothing left for those, so that was a good place to go. And they put them in the kids' room, and the kids play with them, and they have a great time, But there's something about the Legos I can't do that with. Like, I don't want to donate. If I were to sell all my Legos now, I have no idea. I really have no idea. But it would be several $100s. It might be over $1,000 worth of Legos. So, I mean, I don't want to just toss them. I don't want to just give them away, but they are literally sitting in this giant tub in my garage. So what I've told myself is that I'm saving them for the day when I have grandkids. I mean, my son is 19 and a half. My daughter is 16. So it's conceivable in the next 5 to 10 years that I might have grandkids. Will my grandkids want to play with Legos? That's a tough question. My kids weren't that interested in Lego, and you got to think, I mean, at the age when I was a kid, when I was enjoying Legos, my kids were enjoying iPads. And so that's what Lego will have to compete with in the future. And, I have no idea what kind of technology we'll have when I have grandkids. Will Lego be able to compete with that? I don't really know. Maybe someday I will be in a nursing home and I will just go and I will take my Legos and I'll spend my time by the window building old spaceships and having a good time. So that's where my Lego collection has ended up. I don't have a plan with it at this point, but I don't have a plan to get rid of them, but I don't really know what to do with them. So that's unfortunately the end of my Lego story. Well, that wraps up another episode of You Don't Know Flack. If you have feedback about this or any episode of the show, you can email me directly at robohara@robohara.com. Join the conversation on Facebook at facebook.com/Robcast. Follow me on Twitter here at Commodore. Come hang out with us at the Amigos Retro Gaming Discord or leave me a message on the podcast hotline, which is 405-486-YDKF. All patrons of my shows get behind-the-scenes blog posts, weekly videos, access to the Amigos Retro Gaming Discord server, and other additional perks. To find out more, visit patreon.com/Rob O'Hara. You Don't Know Flack is available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and the RSS feed at podcast.robohara.com. To hear more podcasts from me like Sprite Castle, Cactus Flax, Throwback Reviews, and Multiple Sadness, visit podcast.robohara.com for links to these shows. Thanks again for listening. Now let's get back to building brick houses, and we'll see you here next time on You Don't Know Flack.
I know a boy, his name is Zach. His microchips are out of whack. He built a Blacktron Cadillac. He's Zach, the Lego maniac. He sent his cosmic fleet to Mars. He's out there cruising with the stars. His mind is lost in outer space. A Legoland basket case. Zach,